Well, final week of spring ball, so excited to get these last three opportunities. Practice today, practice Thursday, and then spring game on Saturday. You know, looking back at the last week, I think continue to make progress. I think relative to the scrimmage, there's some real, I think, positives from the quarterback perspective between I'm getting loose a few times, Chance Wilson in particular, and then throwing a few touchdowns between Chance, Patrick, and River. We didn't run the ball as effectively on offense, generally speaking, but then that is credit that goes to the defense in that regard. Defensively, outside of the quarterbacks getting loose a couple times, ball to run up, tackled better. We're in the right places more often relative to the run game. Made some plays in the ball in the air. And, it was, again, a day where I think both sides had some levels of success, and that's that back and forth that you do want to see this time of year. I think our secondary continues to come along. I think the continued development of Taki Kepa and Taden Gray definitely does stand out. Some younger guys, Coulter Petrie, J.J. Dolan, are guys I think from here in Montana that have continued to step up. So I think progress there, knowing that Caden Dowler is still, able to plug him back in. I think Bryant Meredith transfers is, I think, shown that he's gonna have an impact. So yeah, all in all, I think continued progress. We're still a team that's a ways off, and that's just where we're at. In the calendar, we don't play till August, so I like the progress that we continue to make here in spring ball, and excited about this last week here. So that'll open it up. Yeah, and Schlepp did as well. So I think those three guys, Schlepp, Provience, and Lencioni, I think have separated themselves. If we were playing today, which we're not, but if we were, it would be those three. And I think a pretty decent rotation. I think they all can do multiple things, and and they're similar enough, but they maybe all three of them have their own strengths within that we could highlight as well. So playing assignment sound, playing physical in the run game, and then getting opportunities in the pass game to make some plays in there, doing that.
You can pinpoint maybe one or two things that you're most proud of, just the growth of this team.
Well, I think it's just you can see guys continuing to mature. I think that's a real broad answer, but those guys that there's a group of them between second and third year, even a few first to second year guys, but more of that second to third year guys. I think they're continuing to mature, guys that would have seen the field some last year, some more than others, but I think that's what we need to see, what we needed to see, and what we continue to need to lay out for them out of spring ball is, all right, this is where you're at now. We do play at the end of August, and here's what you need to do through the course of the summer to continue to develop. I think I spoke to it at the beginning of spring ball that we, between our offense and defensive lines, returned a fair amount of guys that have some experience, then some guys that I would say had been on the outside looking. And I think the continued development of that group has been very important. And then I think last but not least is the coaching staff. I think 4 weeks in spring ball, particularly I think on offense with 3 new guys, but a whole bunch of guys, even returning guys coaching different positions. I feel like all those moves to this point have taken. They've all made sense, and the two sides of the ball, those coaches are really working well together.
Is that still what you're working out?
I think we're still very much working out who's going to be our center. I think it's great to have JT back and back for another go around, whether that's going to be at guard. Like that's what he played almost exclusively last year. I think Burke factoring in to center is still potentially a piece of the puzzle. One of those two guys obviously would play guard, one would play center potentially. And then I think Tommy Nilsson, as we continue to go on with Aiden Kaplan being out, has probably at least established him as a guy that should be in the mix for the two deep. So yeah, I don't know that we'll be able to answer who's playing center until we get to probably the week of the game. Honestly, I think there's some work that has to play out through the course of summer and then ultimately fall camp.
You notice anything about the assistants now that they've got through a full spring camp? Basically, anything that's that with any of them?
Well, I think what just has happened is put them in practice situations, scrimmage situations, personnel evaluations as we've now seen these guys. I think, yeah, it's clear to me we got the right guys in those positions. Again, they're working together well. Each and every week we have a better sense for who we are personnel-wise. You take 4 new guys to the staff, a couple more coaching new positions. They're getting to know their players on the field now. It's one thing to have watched film, to have met with them in the off season, watched them lift and run and those types of things. But now you're getting a chance to watch them and coach them on the field. So I think those relationships, are probably what has been the biggest, just the relationship with the players, the knowledge of the players, the thoughts on the players, and just the thoughts of where we're at, I guess, depth-wise in general, that really have moved along through the course of spring like you hoped it would.
From the scrimmage until this week's game on Saturday, what are you most looking for this week?
Well, it's another week of development, and it's another week for a lot of guys to keep taking a step forward. And the spring game for us, is seen as that final piece of the puzzle evaluation-wise. It is a scrimmage. It's a different scrimmage in the fact that we split up into teams and we do keep score. We have time and clock. So you add those elements, which I think are important. So much of what we do, of course, this spring is scripted, and you try to create situations. Even in a scrimmage, you can put the ball down to create a situation. But there's happening O to D, D to O, all that kind of stuff. We're not going to do much with special teams, but there's a better game feel. So you can see how guys react in that setting a little bit more. So development through the course of these next couple of practices for sure. And then ultimately, how do they respond in that spring game? I'd say atmosphere. Hopefully we have a good crowd here. That in itself is something different for a lot of these guys.
For position, would it be maybe the rushing attack concern on Saturday, just making an improvement?
Yeah, I don't know. I got to look at a lot of those things, and am I discouraged with the offense, or am I happy about the defense? I think it's honestly the defense shoring a few things up, and I think offensively, there's to make a run game go, everything has to be in tune, and we have been down. We have been down Burke for sure. Cedric was making his way back, so we're not exactly full strength up front, but moving some guys around. Running back wise, we're certainly not full strength right now with how we scrimmaged. Julius Adam didn't get any reps, even though they're pretty close. So no, I think it's a little bit of pat on the back to the defense, and offensively maybe a few things here and there that we could have cleaned up.
What'll the format look like Saturday, same as the last few years? And during one of those live scrimmages, what do you look for specifically?
Well, I think the ball is in someone's hands. Does he have the ability to make someone miss? On the other side, do they have the ability to tackle it? I think that's such a big part of. We tag quite a bit, so you're looking at leverage and angles and all those things. But when it comes down to tackling, getting the ball down on the ground, or an offensive player making someone miss, I think that's football. So we only take that risk on, I suppose, so many times. But I think in a scrimmage, that's part of it. I think situationally, how guys respond to the good and the bad, to the good field position, to the tough situations the defense might be put in, to long yardage situations, all that kind of stuff. So, and you hope it just plays out. And I think the difference with the spring game, those guys will get to come off and get feedback from their coaches. And when you have offense versus defense, you just continue to roll. So there's not very much internal feedback within the course of a scrimmage. But in the spring game, that part can happen. So there's still, some things within our staff that haven't happened. I know we have coach-to-player communication now, so that'll be a little bit more applicable in the spring game. We've been using it in our scrimmages, but even how it would play out in a game setting, that will apply a little bit more on Saturday. We won't necessarily have the tablets. I think we felt pretty good about where that's at, but we get a little more sideline feedback that will come into play. Yeah, we won't kick and punt. That would be the one thing. We're just in a different place right now. We'll still advance the ball as if it's being kicked or punted, I guess, when there's turnovers on downs. But otherwise, yeah, it'll flow. The game should. Still trying to figure out, okay, how many plays do we need, and that will probably dictate the times of the quarters and that type of thing. But otherwise, play clock, score, you want that all to be functioning as much like a game as possible.
Brian Meredith, is he nickel? Is that what you guys looking at?
He's been rolling that free. I think what we've seen, and it was really just intentional to give him one position to practice and see where he would be at. But I do think he does have athletically some position flexibility, and I think we knew that coming in. So, whether it's free safety, nickel, or potentially corner, I think he's got all that within the framework of his ability. So we'll have to get out of spring ball and say, okay, as we shape our depth chart for fall, does this mean we dual train him come fall, or do we just stick with him at free?
And there was just something last week about the helmet communication or helmet communication that the FBS has been using. And I guess where you kind of stand on that part, or
well, I think it's added technology that can be helpful. We've been a team that hasn't huddled at times, so there's still that signaling element that you would have in play. But I think for your play caller to be able to communicate with your quarterback, I do think that can't hurt. You got to be able to dial in what that communication looks like, because it does get cut off. I think same goes defensively. With the nature of teams going relatively fast, you're still probably getting a signal instead of huddle on defense, but you can communicate with your middle linebacker in all likelihood and get some communication out as a play caller. So I think that added bonus is probably what's the biggest difference for us, and I think the fact that we've been able to practice it a little bit and kind of work through what that'll look like will be helpful. Not that we won't